Your normal clothes back on, Tom.
I'm reading a book. Hey, good book, by the way. The Seat of the Soul. It's quite new.
Who's the author?
Came out, Gary Zukav, who wrote The Dancing Woolly Masters, which I've championed for a long time as a science book, kind of science overlaid into, or interlaced into spirituality, or spirituality interlaced into science. In this book I was just reading, it's just a question. We're going to try to talk into reincarnation. But we'll start here because it has a question here that I kind of caught my eye. And it says, does non-physical reality exist? Well, if you're watching this tape, hopefully you have some inkling that there is a feasible or possibility non-physical reality to this thing we call the human condition. And this book also deals with the five sensory personality, which is basically all of us. But they're segmenting the fact that a lot of people, scientists, atheists, self-proclaimed atheists, because I don't believe there really is an atheist. I haven't met any yet. I've met a lot of people that
Think they are.
think that they are, claim that they are, and I've never met a real one yet. But at any rate, they typically, using just their five senses, like prove it to me, and it can't exist if you can't prove it, and vice versa. So this gives a question, in regards to the question, does non-physical reality exist? Says proof of non-physical reality does not exist in the dimension of the rational, that the rational mind seeks it. Therefore, when you ask from the perspective of a five-sensory personality, does non-physical reality exist? What you really are asking is, if I cannot prove the existence of non-physical reality, do I decide that it is nonsensical? Do I decide that there is no answer, or do I expand myself to the level at which the answer can be given? And
So you are your own limitation.
Well, yeah, that's very true. And, we're going to attempt to talk into reincarnation, make an attempt anyway. And one of the problems is that you're dealing with a non-physical reality, the mechanics of reincarnation, in that if any of that is true, well, that means that each of us, paying attention now, hearing this tape, is in an incarnation. So from that perspective, we are here, and this is what we call reality. Can we dare assume or prove or disprove the existence of a reality that we have no measurements for? There's no
recollection, no conscious memory of.
No provable recollection.
Right, because sometimes we have the memory and wonder where they come from.
And of course, my famous cautions of past life regression toward getting an answer of reincarnation is that be awfully careful that the regression that you are doing is not simply, and I say, as opposed to more intensively, just simply a clairvoyant functioning of another person, place, thing, or time that could be construed as a previous incarnation. Because all of the measurements that you will gain from a past life regression acting only clairvoyantly is identical to a bona fide past life regression.
Okay, so what you're saying, if I try, because this is really important to me, doing regression, is that if the hypnotist or the person guiding someone back isn't careful, the person could pick up on universal knowledge, which could be anybody's life.
Yes, right.
Rather than their particular life's remembrance.
And the fact that they are functioning clairvoyantly, in the true sense of the word, that they are being in the eyes of King George, that they are feeling what King George felt, that they're knowing intimate personal details, that they can see the secret passageway, the secret mistress, things that are both provable but are rare in history, and non-provable in history but are assuredly known by the person experiencing that. That can be done clairvoyantly.
So you would have had to have been that person to remember some of that person's life.
Coming back from a past life regression or being on a conscious level having had a past life regression, you might very well have gone into a past life of yours.
Mm-hmm.
If it be totally or characteristically, in other words, that you have gained a characteristic from this previous lifetime or this person of a previous lifetime, it might very well be. But the words that you will come back saying, the sentences and the proof that many people use as proof of reincarnation or past life regression, or in fact that it was my past life or your past life, the sentences that they say are not proof at all. They're an inclination that there is a possibility of that. So we're back to what can we prove and what can we disprove?
Right.
And one of the problems that we have a tendency to do is either sit around and wait and wish and read books and wait for somebody to tell us, such as me trying to tell you right now, of the existence of this thing called reincarnation, when in fact we, each of us individually, either have not had the opportunity or simply are not, for any number of excuses or no excuse at all, expanding our mind, expanding our ability to see knowledge, to gain knowledge, in a level or a capacity at which that level, that information will be explainable or seeable. Difficult subject. Well,
If
go
we
ahead.
go right back to saying most of us that are viewing this film were probably brought up in Christian faith, where reincarnation is not acceptable, or it's just beginning to expand to open the possibility.
Yeah, I have to interrupt because in Catholicism, in the Vatican, there are voluminous papers and scriptures and things like that on reincarnation.
That's what I was alluding to. I know in Shirley MacLaine's book, she said that there was a conscious effort in
politics.
that took all reincarnational information out of the Bible.
A little more power, a little more man-made power, a little more control of the masses.
That was the reason.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, sad as it might be for a spiritual conversation, that is the reality of the politics of so many churches, so many religions. That
but if you have more than one lifetime to work out your problems, you may not have to go to your minister or priest.
That's another tremendous fallacy on the part of people's attitude who seem to think, or in fact do, have a recognition or an understanding, or let's just leave it as a fervent belief regarding reincarnation, that, oh well, since I've come from many lifetimes and I have many lifetimes to go, if I screw this time up, I have another chance. And that isn't valid, because that's totally disregarding the fact that life is precious. Any life, any segment of life. And one of the things that I would wish for anybody to do, and again, I have to refer to that book, The Seat of the Soul, because it has a chapter on reverence. And for any of us to get in a conversation like this, we should be at our individual highest level of reverence for life. Reverence in general. Not just the dictionary definition either, but a true reverence for any aspect of life. For instance, a dialogue that I might talk about is reincarnation of a characteristic as opposed to an entire personality, as opposed to an entire soul. Now we'll have to use those terms. So I think I'll start out by giving a quick definition of a characteristic. Doesn't need much of a definition. In other words, I have a characteristic of being overbearing, obnoxious,
controlling.
In control.
Yeah.
That's a characteristic of mine, always has been. I was obsessively in control first 33 years of my life. That's a characteristic. Some people are selfish, some people are. In other words, any characteristic. So it doesn't really need an explanation. In other words, it's an aspect of you. It is not the entire you. In other words, you can be a very loving, wonderful person and have a characteristic that is absolutely intolerable to everybody else around you. All right, and vice versa. If you have many characteristics that are obnoxious or intolerable, you still can be a loving human being. And maybe one or two characteristics are more valuable or more recognizable as divine in nature or more pleasant, more pleasing, and that a vast majority of your characteristics are obnoxious or intolerable, then we would say his or her personality stinks or is intolerable. In other words, your personality...
So personality is made up of several characters.
Well, your personality is made up of all of your characteristics, and then generally, the majority of the characteristics will make up your personality. So we have a little problem there where you can have a couple of bad characteristics and still have a wonderful personality, because a personality is a larger measurement of many measurements, and it's an overall view. In other words, what is his or her personality? Well, you don't list all of the characteristics when you say, oh, his personality is nice, or he has a wonderful personality. You might say, well, he has an obnoxious personality that I just can't tolerate. And you may only be picking on one or two or a few of his characteristics. Or the reverse might be true, that it could be many characteristics. So it's a more ambiguous measurement, but it is a valid measurement. And that a person's personality is not necessarily all of your characteristics, but it might be all of your characteristics. Having said that, the word soul is the more universal, the unified field theory in action. As a matter of fact, it is. It's a more universal wholeness of the being. You are a human being. Well, a human being what? A human being, the soul, incarnate in the human form. And you are being a personality. You are also being at least one or more of your characteristics all of the time. You can be one characteristic as sleeping, or you can be one characteristic as loving, or outgoing, or introverted, or quiet. Those are all characteristics. Your personality may or may not be shown in doing one or two or more of those characteristics at any one time. But if another person is around you long enough, or intensively enough, or intimately enough, the other person will have a judgment of your personality. And then if those are typical characteristics that you have shown that person, by typical I mean usual on a long-term basis and so on, that will give an indication to your personality. But none of those measurements are worth very much at all toward your soul. And one of the problems is that all of your worst characteristics collected all together, measured accurately and collected by the best judges in the world, the best judged people, or all the measurements that we use to measure either a characteristic or a personality. If you had all of those together, it shows nothing of the soul. Now, one of the things that I want to claim and state is that the soul of you, being a female and redhead, and just another redhead. No, it's your soul is certainly incarnate in your personality. Your personality is the redhead, the person, the female sex, the gender, along with all of your characteristics. Now, they are different in many ways, a lot of ways, maybe even a majority of the ways, than my characteristics and my personality. But our souls are quite identical. In other words, can you tell the difference between one cup of light to another cup of light? And on that level, of course, we think, a majority of us think of the singular God as the light. In other words, the Trinity, the oneness of the Trinity is God. And God is the oneness, God is the light, God is light. Right, all those words, and they all mean about the same thing, or close enough that for this talk, we'll say it that way. And we'll say that oneness, that light, is the universal, unconditional love state of God. It's the only other description that we can give to God, other than possibly segregate unconditional love and then say light, or But anyway, it's all meaning the same thing. In other words, the state of unconditional love is light. Light is unconditional love, spiritual light at least, and that is God. Okay? Now, a singular soul has the same power. Now listen carefully, because you have to hear the next couple of sentences to qualify. Don't ever quote Tom Sawyer saying, a singular soul has the same power as God. Well, I'm saying that you have exactly the same intensive power as God. You have the same potential as God. And I mean, here we're getting close to making that statement that you or I are God, that we are God within the human condition. All right, so let me build off this to qualify it. That the oneness of the whole, or the wholeness of the one, being God, is ultimately powerful. You cannot conquer, divide, or diminish unconditional love. It exists omnipresently, omnipotently, or however they say all those things. And that's true, and it exists like that. If you take one cup, a cupful of God, you have God in the cup. That can't be diminished at all. Now, if God, by God's own infinite wisdom and love and so on, decided or decides to allow a few Bleams or a cup of light to be used in such a way as a soul, and for the purpose of incarnating into the human condition, to our level, the light involved in that, and there is light involved in that, is not that there is no light involved. There is light involved. And our soul is that light. It is that one cup, that small amount of that which was purely, divinely God. It has the full power of that. One Bleam of light has the same luminescence, the same unconditional love, the same power of God.
Okay, so Tom, does that mean that if each soul has a cup of the light of God in it, then every soul being equal to every other soul, that no one is more highly evolved than another?
Yeah, basically, from our perspective, that's true. And that on the soul level, there is no greater soul. I know we sometimes use that word and say, oh, he's a highly evolved soul. The soul doesn't evolve. The personality
The soul
does.
is already perfect.
All right, and I want to maintain the word, the soul, for what it is. I mean, we misuse, well, I'm stating that for this conversation at least, to state that the soul evolves at all is not correct. So in other words, sentences that we're used to having heard, or that we have sometimes said, that he or she is a highly evolved soul, or your soul has a long ways to go, right? We can't say those sentences. We then have to start to focus on, which I'm wishing for, which I'm asking for in this talk, is that to recognize personalities. Your personality can be evolved, highly evolved, lesser evolved, no evolvement at all. You're just stagnant. You have the ability to create negative karma, to go backwards, so to speak. You can be born with a certain personality and characteristics and so on that can be culturally conditioned or decommissioned, if you will, and go pretty much backwards. You can actually lose a little bit in your actual evolvement to a spiritual recognition, a spiritual reality, and so on. It's not just as simple as, well, I'm going to be a carpenter this time, and next time I be strictly an intellectual. It's not that simple. You have the human potential of evolving within your personality in practically any and all of those things. Now, you can be limited by, for instance, cultural conditioning, socioeconomical class systems that the world exists. I mean, can that little starving child in Biafra become a physicist? I don't think it would be realistic. It's not completely impossible, but it's unrealistic. And I
It
like it.
doesn't matter if the child or the physicist are that, whether they're loving. I mean, the bottom line of
Well, yes. In other words, if they can recognize their own potential for love and then ultimately become that love, then that's the greater scheme of things rather than to become rich or poor or another
have degrees or whatever.
Again, the external power type accomplishments. In other words, if you have more money than I, are you more highly evolved? Well, certainly not. We know the suicide rate, for instance, is greater in psychologists and psychiatrists than they are in mundane workers, menial type tasks such as shoveling stone or the farmer type stuff, meaning physical work that doesn't require it's hands on instead of heads on. And that's not true. That happiness and love is not relevant to either socioeconomical class or cultural conditioning or external accomplishments. In other words, internally, should you take a lesser of a job, meaning employment, and be happy? And I'm telling you that yes, you should. You should always test yourself, and you should strive to do more, get better, get more money, therefore be more financially secure so that you can have a little spare time to listen to tape recordings and things of this nature. But as a matter of fact, yeah, should you take that higher paying job and be miserable, or should you be poorer financially and be happy? I mean, why should I even answer? I mean, if you're listening to this tape and you're considering that, well, I should leave you alone and let you consider it.
So from your point of view, with your experience as having been part of the light, what is your description? What is your definition of reincarnation?
Oh, goodness, here we go with a simple definition. Well, it is opportunities to evolve through more than one personality. Now, again, I'm stating that personality is a combination of characteristics of yourself, which makes up your personality, and then to go through more than one personality. Because, see, I'm using the word personality meaning who you are. In other words, like as I incorrectly say, your entire epistemology, I mean everything that you are. And in that way, my definition of reincarnation is that your personality is this, who you are at this time, and that it can be reincarnated as an entirely different personality.
With the same soul.
Right, and with an equal soul. In other words, either the same soul or an equal soul having nothing to do with evolvement on that level. It also can, in other words, in this conversation, we can state that a reincarnation that a person dies and goes totally homogeneous back into the light, that is reasonably improbable to have a reincarnation. Either considering it prior, that was a past life, or a future life, that you will be reincarnated or that you have been reincarnated into this current personality, right? It's improbable. It is not usual that takes place. It is more usual that you die or transform into spirituality, which is not totally homogeneous with the light, but remain in a realm of the earth plane. And by that I mean, in other words, within the earthly confines of the human condition, with an attachment of sorts to the human condition. And that may take place many times. The proverbial 10,000 lifetimes in Buddhism is a little ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, they picked a number that is extraordinary for the purposes of teaching. If it be an exact number, of course, it's ridiculous. It's saying, let's count the number of personalities.
So you leave your body behind, you go into the spirit realm, and if you haven't learned everything you should, you take on another body. And you keep doing that until
your soul,
you're ready to go into the light.
And your soul is maintained throughout. Mm-hmm. In other words, as you transform, your soul does not get bigger or smaller, nor does it go totally homogeneous back with the light, usually. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you carry with you characteristics of your personality. And the most simplistic example that I can give is, say, the phrase burning off bad karma means that you have characteristics that are malicious, non-loving, judgmental, overly this, too much that, too much this. And therefore, you have to get rid of that or deal with that. It doesn't mean that you literally burn it up or anything, but you have to deal with it. You have to recognize it, you have to face it, and you have to become that. And then if it is degradation, you have to upgrade it. And if it's an accolade, an over accolade, then you have to get a little humiliation in there to become a little more humble.
For instance, like some people think that if you killed lots of cats in your last lifetime, that in the next lifetime you'll be a cat. But it could be, if you killed lots of cats in your lifetime, then you'll be such a lover of cats that you'll take in 15 or 20.
Also, I've never been comfortable. Yeah, I've never been comfortable with this idea that many people have, that whatever you do bad this time, you're going to come back and have to deal with it in the form of a punishment or a retribution or a rectification. There is characteristics like that. Talking characteristics of reincarnation, that there is a cause and effect relationship there, that you will be given the opportunity. See, everything is opportunities. It's difficult to comprehend that. If you had phobias in a prior lifetime, that you still have to deal with those phobias. And why should you be bothered with such a thing if you learn? There's the key. That in fact you didn't learn, or you didn't totally comprehend. And it doesn't mean that you have to accumulate all of this knowledge and all of these experiences, but more than less it's like that. It's more realistically like that than not.
Okay. So if you've learned from the lesson, then you don't carry it into the next lifetime. But if you haven't, whatever the situation may recycle for the learning process.
You can learn something. You can learn something and not become it.
Yeah.
Now, I would prefer you to think in terms of learn it to the degree that you can become it. And if it's a bad thing, you can become that bad thing and then overcome it. Because you have to become it to overcome it. It was in that realm. Just to learn that, I was a seamstress in this lifetime, therefore I'm never going to do any sewing again or anything like that anymore. Or I have no need or desire, or it doesn't work that way. It may have been just a prerequisite. Also, there is characteristics that have been brought into your incarnation that could be from many personalities.
That was my next question.
Yeah. The prodigy children, the scenarios like that, idiot savant, certain forms of genius or intensities of genius, certain forms of retardation, in fact, are not a mistake per se. They're just a mix and match of characteristics and personalities.
So the child that can sit down and play a piano at the age of 5 is bringing through personality from a previous lifetime.
All right. And again, I just want to correct you for the conversation, not the personality, but that characteristic of the previous personality.
Right.
In other words, you can accumulate characteristics from your personalities, those of previous lifetimes. And another thing that